We are embracing the very cozy vibes right now. And this warm light makes me think of fall, which I am so ready for because this whole week has been about 100 degrees and I just want to wear my warm sweaters and cozy on up with a book or with my knitting. And so yeah. So won't you join me? Won't you embrace the cozy vibes? Make yourself a nice cup of tea and just watch. Please watch. Maybe it's nighttime when you're watching this. If not, save it until nighttime and maybe you'll fall asleep while watching this. I won't be upset. I fall asleep watching YouTube videos as well, so no big deal. Hello, this is Caitlin from the Cozy Moth Reads podcast, but guess what? Yet again, not another knitting video. It is me talking about the books that I read in July. Yeah, so for my birthday, my husband, my sweet, sweet husband, bought me 11 books for my birthday, and in July I read almost half, or about half. I read 5 out of those 11 books in July. Let's get started and hang on tight, and like I said, take a sip of that tea of yours, and let's get on to the book review. So the first book that I read in July is Before the Coffee Gets Cold, and that is by Toshikazu Kawaguchi and translated by Jeffrey Truslott. So Before the Coffee Gets Cold is my first translated work of literature. I've heard so many booktubers talk about their journeys of, reading books translated from, not your native language into your native language, and this is one of the ones that's on everybody's list, probably because it is so easy to get through. And a lot of people, I feel like Japanese literature, Japanese books, including manga, light novels, they're very easy to consume. I don't not to say that other forms of media are not, but maybe I just feel that way because I've read manga and light novels in my past days. In my early 20s, I read manga and light novels. So going into this translated from Japanese, I kind of knew, I kind of already knew or expected the cadence to be a little bit different, some of the things that we're focused on were very Japanese, and I enjoyed it. So, but I'll get into it. So let me read you my little summary that I wrote on Before the Coffee Gets Cold. Before the Coffee Gets Cold takes place in a small cafe in Tokyo where they have been brewing coffee for decades. While coffee shops are a dime a dozen in Tokyo, this one has something special: the opportunity for its patrons to travel back in time. Ooh. There are a few rules though, few very important rules. You can only go back in time within the cafe. You can't venture outside the cafe. Your visit to the past cannot change the present. And you have only until your coffee becomes cold for you to stay in the past. So maybe about 20 minutes. 20 minutes, half an hour. We follow 4 stories of individuals who travel back to the past to right some wrongs and get some answers. As I mentioned before, I have consumed Japanese media in the past, both through manga and light novels, anime. I watched a couple of Japanese vloggers or people who live in Japan and vlog their life in Japan. So I kind of I think all that prepared me for reading a translated Japanese novel. Not that it was hard or anything, I just kind of knew, I was aware of the culture a little bit beforehand for reading this, and it pretty much met my expectations. I found all the stories to be, absolutely beautiful. It really made you consider your relationships with the people in your present life and how, life is finite and, people grow old or they, die, or relationships end abruptly. A lot of us take, our relationships with our friends and loved ones for granted up until they're gone, And it really makes you consider the time that you spend with your loved ones and, you know, making the most of it all when you're together with them. I give Before the Coffee Gets Cold 3.5 stars. All right, the next book that I have to talk to you about is one that I had high expectations for, but when I read it, I was kind of disappointed, and that is McGlue by Ottessa Moshfegh. And I have read one other Ottessa Moshfegh novel, and that is My Year of Rest and Relaxation, and I enjoyed that one. So I went into this one reading her little novella with high expectations because I liked the previous one, and this one I just was not really into. It kind of left a bad taste in my mouth, unfortunately, because, you know, I've been wanting to read more of Moshfegh's fiction, but I just was not into this one. But I'll read the blurb. Salem, Massachusetts, 1851. Now see, starting off with that, it's okay, I'm hooked. I want to know what happens. Salem, Massachusetts, 1851. McGlue is in the hold, still too drunk to be sure of name or situation or orientation. He may have killed a man. That may or may not have been his best friend. Scandal. Intolerable memory accompanies sobriety. A sail on the high seas of literacy tradition. Ottessa Moshfegh gives us a nasty, heartless background on a nice, sharp voyage through the fog of recollection. See, it seems so interesting, right, when you read that blurb, but then you get into it, and I just was not feeling it. I was not impressed. I found it to be incredibly slow paced, and the infatuation between McGlue and his shipmate, just felt very forced and not very, I couldn't really believe it. I was just not a fan of this one, and I think I went into it expecting something more like Our Flag Means Death. If any of you guys have watched that fantastic series, highly recommend it. I expected that and did not get that, and I guess that's on me, because I don't think that's, I don't know, why I expected, this novel that has been around since, yeah, this one was published in 2014, almost 10 years ago. 8 years ago this was published, and Our Flag Means Death came out this year, so I don't know why I expected Our Flag Means Death vibes out of this one. Maybe because I thought, oh, ships, pirates, I don't know. But yeah, I was just not, even though I read the whole thing, it's a novella, it's very short. I can't really tell, I couldn't tell you what happened. I read it, but I did not like it. So I don't have a quote for this one. I'm gonna give it 1 star. No offense, Ottessa, I just was not into it. So 1 star for me. Alrighty, so after reading a dud like McGlue, I was just ready for something to blow me away. I was ready for a very good story, remarkable characters, something to draw me in, and I found it. And I found it in Coco Malore's Cleopatra and Frankenstein. And this book, I can't speak any more highly of it. I recently watched Jack Edwards' 20 Books You Should Read in Your 20s, and this was on that list. And I was glad to see it on that list because I do feel like it beautifully encapsulates your 20s. Even though I am in my late 20s, I have not finished my 20s just yet. I feel like a lot of people in your 20s can relate to Cleo, the protagonist in this story, even if you don't live in New York City on a student visa. I'm sure that a lot of people could relate to her. But here is the general summary that I wrote for Cleopatra and Frankenstein. A few months before her student visa expires, 24-year-old painter Cleo meets 45-year-old Frank. I'm already hooked. Okay, I'm already into it. Self-made businessman in advertising, whose love of drinking turns out to be the downfall of his relationships. The two fall head over heels for each other at a holiday party thrown by mutual friends, and in order to keep Cleo in the country, The two marry before spring is over. A whirlwind romance. But Cleo and Frank are not the only characters who the reader gets to know. We have Quentin, Cleo's GBF, who is addicted to toxic relationships and hard drugs. We have Anders, Frank's longtime work friend and the object of Cleo's revengeful affections. Zoe, Frank's spoiled little sister, who is just trying to live her best sugar baby life. And so many more friends, lovers, enemies that pop out of Cleo and Frank's life. This is a wide cast of characters. While the primary focus is on Frank and Cleo's roller coaster of a marriage, the side characters each have several opportunities to take center stage. And that is really what kept me interested in this book. My feet are so asleep right now. While I was, really into Frank and Cleo's relationship, I found it so incredibly fascinating. It was so great to, sorry, I'm distracted by my socks. I was so happy to see these side characters take center stage, because a lot of times in these, type of books, the side characters come in and out and you don't really learn much about them, even though you would want to, but you get to learn a lot about the side characters. I read this book in 2 large sittings, and I was just absolutely enthralled. I was, if you can't tell already, I was obsessed. Like, even though it's set in New York, and some people tend to highly romanticize New York, and as someone who lives within 2 hours of New York and know people who have lived in New York and have visited New York, I feel like the romanticization of New York is that's all it is, romanticization. I love those TikToks where people will film videos of like rats crawling out of the garbage and be like, oh, why'd you move to New York? I don't know, I just love the ambiance, just love the vibes of New York, and there's like rats crawling out of the garbage, and that's, that's New York, baby, that's New York. There was a little bit of romanticization in there, but not enough for it to be absolutely annoying. There were a few moments in this book that were very real to me, as we see Cleo and Frank's relationship start to take a turn. There were some arguments that were played out that were the same arguments that Phil and I had in our early relationship, or in our early marriage, I should say. And whenever, when I was reading it, like, my heart kind of sank deep into my chest, putting myself back in those situations where Phil and I were, at each other's throats, and, over things that a lot of people who are just married, go through, the power dynamics and the, sharing your life with another person, and, those type of arguments can really dismantle a marriage, and some marriages don't make it because of those arguments, and, for better or worse. So Jack Edwards listed this book on his list of 20 books to read when you're in your 20s because of the dynamic relationships, and I wholeheartedly agree. The people that you surround yourself in your 20s really, I feel like, leave the biggest impact on you. And they really shape the person you become, because you're transitioning out of, adolescence, out of childhood into your 20s. And the people you surround yourself with can either be a great influence on you or a bad influence, and that can really lead you down, the many different paths you go down in life. I just found it to be a really great observation on Jack's part, and I wholeheartedly agree with that observation of his. As someone who is, getting close to leaving their 20s, I do agree about the importance of the people you surround yourself in your 20s, and how I'm happy that Coco Malors highlighted those people in her book. So I'm going to read a quick little quote from Cleopatra and Frankenstein, a little bit in the beginning. She had not told Quentin what Frank's actual vow was. He had surprised her by requesting to say something at the end of the ceremony, after the actual script had been read. He was noticeably nervous. His usual gregariousness was gone. When he finally did speak, it was one single sentence. When the darkest part of you meets the darkest part of me, it creates light. I give Cleopatra and Frankenstein, 5 stars. And that is my third 5-star book of the year. Coming off the high of Cleopatra and Frankenstein, I decided to pick up a smaller, a much smaller book, but I had heard so many rave reviews on, and that is Another Brooklyn by Jacqueline Woodson. Jacqueline, one of them. Jacqueline Woodson. And, as you can see, National Book Award finalist. It's fantastic. I was just, again, another story that I was absolutely engrossed in. I literally read this book in a day. That's how, into the story I was. I was blown away by Woodson's writing style. It reminds me a lot of prose written by Black writers during the Civil Rights Movement. It's the cadence, exposition, and dialogue. It really fits into the narrative of the whole story as a young girl, who moved from her childhood home in Tennessee to an apartment in Brooklyn shortly following the death of her mother. While her father and brother are delving headlong into the Muslim faith, August comes of age before the reader's eye, and she discovers how damaging, dangerous, and cruel the world can be to a young woman, especially a young Black woman. Throughout the book, we learn about the girls being snatched and raped by men who lurk in plain sight, where August has 3 best friends who come from very different worlds, but they all face the same dangers that she does. As time goes on, they drift apart, for better or for worse, and we see August grapple with the hurt of losing those that she cares about the most. This was another book that I simply could not put down. Like I said, I read it in one day, and I couldn't put it down. I was just so enthralled by it. I thought it was a beautiful and heartbreaking story, and I highly recommend you also read this book in a day. It's definitely it's so quick. Like, prose doesn't even fill the whole page. It's just beautiful, beautiful writing. All right, the quote that I picked from Another Brooklyn is as follows. I watched my brother watch the world, his sharp, too serious brow furrowing down in both angst and wonder. Everywhere we looked, we saw the people trying to dream themselves out, as though there was some place other than this place, as though there were another Brooklyn. I give Another Brooklyn 4.5 stars. All right, y'all, it is officially dark, like extra dark. We still have the nice cozy light, beaming on us, and we have one more book to review. The tea's almost gone. It's just cozy vibes tonight. All right, the final book that I read this month was, to follow up. All the books that I read this month were just fantastic, but it was just one after another of fantastic novels, and this one is no exception, and it is Happy Hour by Marlo Grandos. And can we take a look at this cover? Can we just admire how beautiful this cover is? This color is my ideal color palette, okay? It's absolutely beautiful. I love a good cover, and this one is no exception. So let me read you the fantastic blurb that comes with Happy Hour, the novel. Isa Epley, all of 21 years old, is already wise enough to understand that the purpose of life is the pursuit of pleasure. She arrives in New York, another New York novel, 3 New York novels in one. Arrives in New York with her newly blonde best friend, looking for adventure. They have little money, but that's hardly going to stop them. By day, the girls sell their clothes at the market stall, pinching pennies for their Bed-Stuy sublet and bodega lunches. By night, they weave between Brooklyn, the Upper East Side, and the Hamptons, among a rotating cast of celebrities, artists, internet entrepreneurs, stuffy intellectuals, and bad-mannered grifters. Resources run ever tighter, and the strain tests their friendship as they try to convert social capital into something more lasting. Then precarious gigs as au pairs, nightclub hostesses, paid audience members, and aspiring foot fetish models. As if you can't tell by the way that I talk about this book already, I was blown away by the story. I was absolutely blown away. I thought I was just enthralled by Isa and Gayla's story, and how they were able to live in New York on the budget they were on. Do you ever like look at shows like Friends or I don't know, what's another New York show? Like shows like Friends or maybe like, you know, YouTubers who live in New York, or maybe you have a friend or a family member who lives in New York and you wonder like, how can they afford to live there? Like, how do they live in New York City? Like, I don't understand. That was this whole book. Basically, I was like, how are they living there? Like, how are they like, I don't know how it's happening. And just like, you know, seeing them just like get by the way that they did, and like presenting themselves as these, you know, beautiful, glamorous, exotic girls, and in reality they're, you know, sharing a room in Bed-Stuy with like 5 other people. And it's just very, very interesting to read about their lives. Prose in this novel is absolutely exquisite. There are no words wasted in this book. Every sentence is carefully crafted. It's a work of art. This book took me a little bit longer to read than the rest of them, basically because I was just like constantly being bombarded with art, and I had to like sit back and like take it in, but it was worth every moment. Like, again, like there was no like dull moments in this book. It's, you know, very densely, like you can see, like it's very dense prose. And yeah, it was just absolutely beautiful. I highly recommend you pick this one up, if only to read about the insane shenanigans that Isa and Gayla find themselves in. But before we end off, I will read this little quote that I marked. We were all standing around talking to each other when Lilu remarked to Edith that she could tell that Gayla and I were fresh. Capital F, fresh. People in New York like girls who are fresh. First, because they are new, and second, because they are vulnerable. You know, when you meet someone younger than you, they're so doe-eyed and stupid, and you're just itching to burst their bubble. Edith agreed, then said, "It's actually quite sick." I said, "Do people think that life begins the moment you step off whatever plane or train brought you here? Like nothing of consequence has ever happened to you before?" I guess that means in the scheme of things, Gayla and I are 6 weeks old. How promising. Gayla took me into her arms and put her head on my shoulder. We are the friendliest girls in New York. I'm going to read a second quote because I feel like it very much encapsulates the vibes of Gayla and of Isa and Gayla. The popsicles in Central Park are overpriced. Gayla and I both get strawberry shortcake kind. I like the graham cracker cum coating. It gave the popsicle heft, more substance in comparison to its watery counterparts. The cream started to drip down our fingers, and we stopped on the edge of the park to finish eating them over the garbage can, so as not to dirty our new clothes. We threw out the popsicle sticks and ran our hands under the nearby water fountain. Gayla grabbed my arm. "Let's go to the plaza." How funny it looked, sitting there across the street from the mouth of the park. I give Happy Hour 4 stars. All right, it is now almost 9 o'clock and it is definitely dark here. You can't even see the details of my hair. It just looks like a black void around my face. But thank you for tuning in and watching me talk about the books that I read this week. And I hope that you enjoyed hearing what I had to say about these as much as I like talking about them. Let me know in the comments what you've been reading recently. I would love to hear if you've read any of these books or are interested in reading any of these books. I recommend all except one of them. And yeah, just I would love to hear your feedback on the whole thing. So I guess I will just leave it here. And until next time, stay safe everyone. Keep reading, and I will see you all later.